Hi, I'm Amy McDougall. I am mom to a daughter, Noelle, who is now 18, who has Prader-Willi syndrome. And professionally, I'm a school psychologist, which is kind of what brought me into contact with my friend, who's also going to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Cindy Zapax, and my son Dashel is 13. He also has Prader-Willi syndrome, and I work as a board-certified behavior analyst in the public school system in Pennsylvania. And I, yes, met Amy through Prader-Willi syndrome. Because we're not even in the same state.
Nah, that's one of the things I think I'm most grateful for in terms of this diagnosis is we never would have crossed paths with one another if it wasn't for this diagnosis. So it's just kind of a totally random way where you hear people like get connected on Facebook and talking about stuff. And I don't even remember, Cindy, what were you talking about? Like you were having something going on.
There was something, Dashel was like, I think in first grade, and it was one kindergarten, first grade. And those first couple years in school, we had a lot of issues with the school and a lawyer and things like that. And I had put something on one of the Facebook groups about something involving IEPs, testing, curriculum, something like that. And then you had messaged me back. And so we were Facebook messaging. So that was like 8 years ago, I guess, if he's 13. If I can do math, something like that.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of were like, we were like on the same wavelength with things, which was really cool.
Yeah. And I think we were probably Facebook friends consulting on different things for probably a couple of years before we both
we'd
happened.
end up like, well, we'd end up tag teaming because somebody would say, oh, I have, and you know, my kid, or I don't know what to do with this, with the school or behavior. And then you jump in, I'd be like, oh, that's great. And then this, and we'd have this, like, we had never met in person, but somehow like we had the Prader-Willi connection. And then we just had this like brain wavelength connection through the state borders. We give like the same advice. And then we met at conference.
Yeah, which was funny because I didn't even realize that you were in a presentation I was doing. And I finished up. Oh, and I really dislike public speaking, so I'm always nervous and worried. And you caught me right afterwards. And we're like, you just set me up for my presentation. This is great.
Because we were back to back. You presented about something school, you know, school psych and Prader-Willi, and then I presented about behavior and Prader-Willi. And yes, so I sat through yours first because we were back to back in the same room. And the whole time I was like, this is perfect. This is what I'm saying, but with like more of the psychology side of it, maybe, you know, a little bit more of that piece. But generally speaking, it's the same. So if people stay, it'll be a really cool connection. And then you stayed for mine, right?
I did. Yep.
Yep. And then you stayed for that one. And then we just like hung out the whole weekend. Like, I don't even really remember exactly.
Yeah. We ended up going out for dinner. I think I invited myself to stay in your hotel room because something had happened with my reservation. And I needed to leave at 4 a.m. and didn't want to sleep in my car.
Yep. So the second day I think we had ever met, we shared a hotel room.
Just moved in. But yeah, it was great. And I think since then, we've just kind of kept the collaboration going. We've presented at conferences together. We've proofread each other's presentations. So it's been a lot of fun. And I know for me personally, one of the things I truly appreciate is just the opportunity to collaborate with somebody who gets it and talks the same lingo that I do from work, but yet has had such different experience because Dash and Noelle are like totally different kids.
Totally different.
And
very
so different. It's always nice to be able to collaborate and ask questions. And I feel like it's helped me both personally and professionally because I've got a broader experience from having been able to collaborate with you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel the same way because it's that different, like I said, that little bit of a different lens with the school psychology lens. Your daughter's older, so you've got to try some things out first. So I can be like, what did work, what didn't work, and help steer me that way, which is really grateful for that, just to have kind of like another companion on the path. And
I think one of the other things I appreciate is just that we both have kind of the same sense of humor. about a lot of things, because so often the stories we're telling are not necessarily funny, or at least they're not necessarily funny in the moment dealing with Prader-Willi,
Yes.
but yet being able to laugh and step back and consider has been huge. Oh
Yeah,
man.
it's like that common bond. It's like if I said it, even with other people I've met whose kids don't have Prader-Willi syndrome, it's still not quite the same. Like I feel like some of our kids' behaviors or the way they do things is pretty unique, and you don't get that same connection. So having that connection with the disability and the similar job experience is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's very
How do you
neat.
feel like Prader-Willi has changed how you do things professionally?
I always say that he's made me a better at my job, like for sure. I think being a parent, if you work with children and you're not a parent, you're still really good at working with children, but then you have that child and it adds a layer and you're like, oh wow, I get it now. I get why maybe kids sleep in parents' beds for a year when, professionally, maybe I'm telling them, no, maybe a kid slept in my bed for a while. It may or may not have happened. And then the Prader-Willi component, and since I do work with students, I work with school-age students with disabilities, and just navigating it as a professional and a parent, like sitting on both sides of the IEP table is super interesting. And it's definitely given me more empathy towards parents and more like, and for the students too, it's like given me more avenues to address other than just straightforward behavior analysis. That lens, I can still do the behavior analysis and use the science and add in a little bit more of the whole person lens. I'd imagine, have you seen a similar experience?
Yeah, I think it definitely has helped me. Well, often feel like I'm sitting on the fence between school and being a parent, because I can see both sides of it. So I feel like in some respects, my job has helped me be a better advocate and be better able to help parents in terms of their advocacy, because I know the sorts of responses that the school might give, or the things that they might get hung up on, or where they're going to struggle. But yet I also see the parent perspective and know the things that I would want them to be able to share and understand. And even sitting around a table when I'm running meetings or doing evaluations, my conversations are so much different now, in terms of, I get why this is a stressor. I get why you're worried about this, and why this is something that we need to address, versus just pushing ahead to what, we're just thinking about on the school side. So
Yeah, for sure. I know it's also helped me appreciate the power that medication can have when it's truly, truly needed. Like you still have to do the whole component with the behavior side and structure and routine, but you do that and you may not get the full response that you want. And then you add in a medication here or there. And like for us, like I wish we didn't have to use as many medications as we do, but there's no other way. And it's been definitely eye-opening to see how beneficial that can be, when it's done thoughtfully and in a scientific way. But that's really been eye-opening.
And that's honestly, talking with you about that has helped me, because we haven't had to do medication, other than just some basic, hormonal stuff. We haven't needed to look outside that. And just the problem solving, and Dash has just been so sensitive to some of those changes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would have dreamed that such slight changes could have made such a huge difference for a kid. So that's really, just collaborating with you on those sorts of things has made a huge difference for me as well.
Oh, that's cool. Cool.
So I know, it's kind of wild and crazy. So, being a parent of a child with Prader-Willi, thinking about the lessons that's taught, because I think we all come into parenting think that, oh, I got this, it's going to be okay. And it just completely, you have to look at everything differently.
Yeah.
But on one hand, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that while I have to approach things differently because of the Prader-Willi, I still want to have a lot of consistency between what I'm doing with my other kids and my child with Prader-Willi. So I might modify my expectations, but I'm still holding those same high standards, and still pushing for growth and really looking to develop. So finding that balance, I think, has been one of the biggest lessons. And I think I'm still learning it. I'm not going to say I've mastered it.
I think you're pretty good at it. I think that's
Thank
something
you.
that I've gotten from you, like as far as grateful from the stuff you've done, how far you have been able to push and the things you've done and the way you've approached certain conversations, you know, with Noelle and involved her in has gotten me to think sometimes like, oh, okay, it's, you know, because I'm definitely on the pushy side too, as well. So it's like, and that's what I've learned is that it's okay to not push. And
Yeah.
because I'm more, my internal like personality is to, if something's hard, it means you need to do it better. Like I'm a type of person that if you see an obstacle, you're going to attack it. You're not going to back down. And so for me, it's been learning that sometimes things are too much. And like those coping skills, like that's not a failure. It's sometimes we're tired and we just don't do it. And it's not like, well, you're tired, deal with it, push through, and you'll be fine. It's just not worth it. You know, that's maybe my personality and what would work for me. But, you know, for him, it's better to get a few things done and he enjoys it, because sometimes pushing through makes it not enjoyable and then we ruin it forever. So for me, it's learning about kind of taking a step back and saying, it's fine. No one's failed. Nothing bad is going to happen if we don't go to this practice or we skip this assignment, because everyone's calm, cool, and collected, and that's all that needs to happen.
It's so true. I was thinking that, like, as you're talking, I was like, yep. Because when you're an overachiever, it's really hard to kind of pick and choose what makes the most sense. And I've also had to struggle with, I am not somebody who likes to ask for help. And so having to find that balance of knowing when it's okay to ask for help and teaching Noelle that it's okay to ask for help, so that she can better self-advocate for herself. I've kind of learned a little bit about that myself too, because I was never a fan of telling anyone that I couldn't do anything or I couldn't accomplish it. It was just, I was going to take care of it. So.
Yep, that sounds similar. And I think that Dashiell has taught me a little bit about asking for help, because he's always been, from like the get-go, like as a baby, as a toddler, known what's within his kind of realm. And when something's too hard or just not, you know, it's just too much, he's known to just stop. And it's not so much that he's giving up, it's that he just knows I've hit my limit. And he's always been a really good advocate for himself, like asking for help if he needs it. Or, you know, we signed him up for a dance class once and he went right in and he said, I need a one-on-one. Excuse me, teacher, you need to find me an aide because I need
awesome.
it. And he did, and he was right, and they got him one, and it was great. They were the ones trying to have him do it without his own, and I said, I don't know how it's going to work, but we'll try it. And he went, I didn't tell him, he went right up. He was like 11 years old. He went right up. I need this aid. And so, and it's kind of actually taught me, so I'm a little grateful for that component from him, because it's taught me to recognize your limits and to ask for that help.
I just think that's one of the best things that we can teach our kids, is how to know what they need and then to be able to ask for it. And it's funny, I don't know about you, but like being a part of the Prader-Willi community has also been like a huge growth experience for me, because having to advocate for someone is like, I've really had to grow. I'm not somebody that really ever wanted to branch out, talk to other people. I just kind of wanted to do my thing and go forward. And I've kind of been pushed into a position where getting involved in my state organization was huge. Like, I'm so grateful that I did, but I never would have dreamed that I would have been, you know, having to go and advocate, you know, with legislature, you know, or a governor, or speak in front of, you know, 300 people at a state conference, or those have all been things that I never would have dreamed before we started this journey I ever would have done.
And you always say that, and I find that so hard to believe, because I've only met you post, and you're like such a good speaker, and you look great, and you look great things to say, and you so easy to talk to. But so it definitely doesn't come off that way. So
thank you. But I think that I just like, that's one of those things that I think we as a community like need to be willing to push our limits to say, this is what not only my kid needs, but other people need. and whether it's advocating, because I think that right now we're going into a time when funding is going to be tough. And we need to start really looking at, how can we seek opportunities for our kids as adults? And how do we build awareness for our kids in schools? And just start pushing the limits. It's been a struggle because I'm a huge proponent of research, and we took part in one of the clinical trials. But when we started this journey, 15 years ago, because she got her diagnosis as a toddler, everybody was talking about a cure then. And I'm still holding out hope that something's going to come along, but we've really had to push for how do we meet everybody's needs in the meantime. And I think that's one of the biggest things as a community that we need to do, is focus in on what can we do to meet everyone's needs while still searching for a cure and pushing for those things.
Yeah, because it seems like now with the early intervention and the knowledge and the training that this generation, I remember Dashiell was diagnosed at 11 days old, and the doctor telling us, don't read the internet because he's part of this new generation of, growth hormone and early intervention. So a lot of what you read. So those kids seem to be this, they're now teenagers and they're getting older. And it's a lot more of this behavioral mental health component that seems to be holding them back. Obviously the hyperphagia as well. And for that's varying too. For some, it's just interesting to see how that varies within the population as well. But that component, because I always think even if there were a cure, right, today, we've had 13 and a half years of living life a certain way. So we have 13 and a half years to undo. So I don't even know if for those older, what does a cure mean at this age? I imagine you've probably thought about that too, right? Because there's a lot to, there's a lot. There's a whole history of stuff that's happened that fixing that, that chromosome doesn't erase the 13 or the 16 or the 18 years that have come before it. So obviously it would be huge for the younger population.
Yeah. And we've spent pretty much our whole lives, hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. And so we've really, everything has been a long range game in terms of what do I want her to be able to do? And what structures do we have to make sure that she is able to do those things? So there were things that from day one that we were like, maybe we're not going to touch that. Like Noelle fully accepts that she's not going to drive because she does have hyperphagia. So she knows that if she was able to swipe my keys and go somewhere, that could not turn out well. So it's better just to not know how to swipe mom's keys and go somewhere. But on the other hand, she's very much able to say, I need this, this, and this. And she's done all sorts of great and amazing things. So yeah, that's, I think one of the toughest moments as a parent for us kind of came this summer, when we realized that the trial we were doing was definitely a huge improvement in her quality of life. And she's happy and she's doing phenomenal, but the hyperphagia was still there. And it was kind of a devastating moment to realize that we weren't looking at full independence, and I've had to kind of work past that, but I'm like reveling in all the things that I'm happy about now, all the things she can do and how far she's getting ready to graduate with a Regents diploma in 4 years. So like something we never dreamed would happen. And I've really been working at being grateful for the amazing progress she has made and not necessarily grieving the things that might not happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's, you got to kind of look at the half full piece and be like, well, but then there's, you really can't predict the future for anyone. Like I know we have other children that don't have Prader-Willi syndrome, and they scare me a little bit more sometimes, honestly. I feel like I have a little less control in that respect, and not so much of a guidebook. There's like a tiny bit of a guidebook here when you look within, the spectrum of Prader-Willi syndrome and behaviors and things like that. And then when you kind of see where your kid falls, you get a little bit more of a trajectory than your other kid that's just, here you go, take care of them.
It's definitely changed how I parented the other ones too. But
Yeah,
that being said, like I think that after seeing them deal with her sister and how they support her, like that's one of the things that like I look at my youngest and I'm like, oh my goodness, like it's phenomenal what he's learned. He's never known life without Prader-Willi syndrome. My older one had 7 years before Noel came along, and that was a learning process for him. But my youngest has never known life without. But I look at the degree of compassion and the way he looks at other people and thinks about their needs. And it's not an effort for him. He's just like, well, duh, why wouldn't you consider that? And it's a pretty cool thing to see. They still don't get along all the time, but
well, they're siblings. If they did, that would be a little weird.
But
they definitely can't get along all the time.
What about you? Like, what are you looking for, like in terms of dreams as you're looking forward and what you're hoping to see happen?
It's funny, like I was saying the other day, we're just kind of starting that journey because this is our first transition IEP year. We just had the transition IEP 2 weeks ago. So he'll be 14 in December. So starting to talk to him about what he wants to do when he gets older, and he has some interesting ideas at the moment. So we're just going to mold and shape them into something that we can work with.
Okay. What was the entertaining thing he wanted to do?
When his teacher interviewed him, he did say he wanted to help people. He wanted to help people with their clothes and taking their clothes on and off. And luckily she understands him and just kind of probed, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? And he wanted to help, like, be a nurse. Cause if you're in a hospital and they help you put the gown on, so he wants to be a helper. He wants to like be a nurse or a doctor. But that first statement was a little, and he would like to play pool one day.
I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know. I was very grateful to his teacher that she was able to like probe and get the actual meat of what he meant out of it.
We get a lot of good stories out of the things they say and how they describe it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's great. It's pretty neat. Like, I don't know if it's for you, but I know when I take him out in public, people are grateful for him. Like I can't tell you how many people I've had look at me and say, like total strangers, and say, I was having a really bad day and he just smiled at me, or of course he talked to me because he talks to everyone he sees, but my day just got better. Like I was having a horrible day. His smile and what he came over and talked to me, and now I just feel so much better and I'm ready to go on. And that's pretty cool to see that, he can have that effect on people.
I'm always overwhelmed by, because obviously we know all the structure and the routine and the struggles and everything to deal with the food, and to work on advocacy. But like every single one of her teachers along the way has commented that they just don't know how she does it every day and how she forges on and how she's just always happy and upbeat and works so hard, because they're like, I get hangry. I'm miserable when I'm hungry. And yet, she lives like that. But so I've had so many people just say like, she's pretty much a fave. I mean, I actually there was one day that she had gotten in trouble on the bus for stealing food. And I was all set to just, go in and shoo somebody out. And then I found out that the assistant principal, who had taken a real interest in her syndrome and was fascinated and like was loving getting to know her, had gotten a hold of the referral and like, this is dumb, ripped it up, and it disappeared before I even had to go in and say anything. So it's amazing how inspiring our kids can be to other people. And it just sometimes it catches you off guard when you're in the midst of struggling with some of the stuff, and other people are just like, oh my gosh, they're amazing. And I was like, yeah, she really is.
Do you ever step back sometimes? Like for me in that realm, if either it's a period of time where maybe Dash is going through something and things are difficult for him, or something that I'm trying to do is difficult for me, and then I take a step back and think, like you had said, like how does she forge on hungry all the time? Take a step back and be like, how is he I just heard a weird noise, but I think I'm all right. No, my headphones. No, I'm good. Sorry. So how it gets me to push forward sometimes, just thinking about, well, he's pushing through, like, yeah, I'm really frustrated because of these calls from school or this certain behavior, but then putting that lens, well, this means something. He's tired, he's sick, he's hungry, he's something, and it could always be worse. And he's dealing with this a lot, and he's feeling just or even worse than I'm feeling. So I kind of need to get over it and see what I can do to help him rather than be, frustrated about it. So that will kind of help me
Yeah, I've definitely had those moments where I have to step back and I'm just like, as frustrated as I am, she's probably in way worse shape. And I
Hmm.
think we were talking once about like, things that people have told you, or words to live by, or things that you really appreciate. And I was like, one of the things that somebody told me years ago, which is a funny thing to say to someone who's like a real control freak, is that the person who's the quietest or the loudest is the least in control. And I was like, that really helps me sometimes. And I'm like, I need to be in control for this, and I need to stay calm, and I need to pull myself together, because if she's getting loud, she's just gone. She doesn't have the
Yeah.
control to give right now. So that's been, and it's also kind of interesting just when other people acknowledge their work ethic. Like I know years ago, learning comes easy to my youngest. Her younger brother was just like, one day was just like, yeah, like I got really good grades and this is awesome. And I just looked at him and I was like, what do you think your grades would be like if you worked as hard as Noelle does? And he was like, huh, okay. And he, like, it was just kind of like one of those motivations to him. He was like, yeah, like I should be manning up to do what she's doing. And that was kind of fun.
Oh, that's a good one.
Probably not my best parenting moment to just pull that out, but you
Well,
know.
he needs a little motivation. He needs a little motivation. Yeah,
uh
but it's definitely this whole Prader-Willi community is pretty amazing. Like just kind of grateful for the whole community. Because I know when we first started this journey 13 and a half years ago, it was before Facebook and it was the Yahoo groups. And I'd come home, he was in the
yeah.
NICU for 3 months. And so I'd come home from the NICU and put my message in, and 3 days later it would get approved and I'd get my answer, and and by then it was helpful whether it got it in time or not, but would not have gotten through those first 3 months and been pushed to advocate for that early growth hormone without all those parents that that came before me, and that were
Yeah.
there to do that. So it's super grateful for just that whole community in general,
Yeah, no, I have loved being a part of the state organization because of the people I got to meet. Because some of the individuals that first sucked me in were gentlemen whose kids were my age. And so they had done this before early intervention. I mean, one of them was sharing that he had gone into the New York City Public Library and was like going through the stacks of periodicals, reading in physical therapy magazines to try and come up with a regimen to help
Wow.
his daughter. And they had, I mean, Prader-Willi wasn't even an ICD-9 code. It wasn't something you could bill for at a medical office until some of these
Wow.
parents. Yeah. So just being a part of the organization and meeting those individuals was just so inspiring, and just motivated me to do more and to speak up, and now I look at national too, like just bringing together all the organizations across the country. And there are people there that I love to call and collaborate with and get
Yep.
information from. And a lot of times too, if I'm like in a bit of a pinch where like I know what I want to say and I need information to kind of back me up, I don't
Yep.
have to go and do my own research. I can just call them and get
Yep.
the
Exactly. I call
resources
you.
I need. But it's great. I'm like, oh, I know that it's there. I won't have to put it together myself because somebody else has already done all the work and they've done a better job than I probably would. so, so I go and just suck their brains dry.
I know. Do you feel, I think we talked about this one time, but just given that the professional path that we both had chose has nothing to do with our kids. Like I know, like I work in special ed, and some of the people I work with started getting in the field of special ed after they had a child with, a diagnosis or syndrome, and they got really interested. But, I started working with kids with special needs when I was in high school. And so when he got his diagnosis, and my husband also does research at the time on obesity and anxiety and type 2 diabetes and things like that. And we put the two together and we were just kind of like, well, we're kind of got a little bit more information than your average Joe. So at some point, maybe we can branch out and help other people, because for whatever reason, we have this information and other people don't. So I've always been grateful to have that starting point, I guess, a little bit higher. I don't know if you've ever thought about that or felt kind of similar.
Yeah, I've been very grateful for what we were doing professionally. I also, like, if I have to think about like where I would love to see the community get to, I think about like, I would love to have every parent feel like they could start at that same baseline where maybe they didn't have it themselves, but they knew where they could go to get it. And so that Prader-Willi was becoming more of a household name and people would recognize it and you wouldn't have to fight some of those battles. Um, and just have the community really come together and collaborate to keep advocating for, the opportunities our kids need. I think we're
Yeah,
always going to have challenges. We're always going to have stuff we're struggling with, but I would love to see us, pull together even more to keep branching out and advocating even more.
yeah, it'd be nice, in the future to have, like if you think about autism, which obviously is much more prevalent, but a lot of people know what your quote unquote, I don't want to say standard, but specific things you would do in a classroom or you would have in a classroom. And Prader-Willi syndrome has that. If you were to talk to people who know Prader-Willi syndrome. So it would be nice to have that out there more. So schools and parents would be able to start without having to fail first, because I
Yeah.
see a lot of that, and then parents reaching out and asking for help, and then the school system just isn't prepared, they don't know, and then hopefully things turn around. But it would be nice if they could start with that, in that preschool, they could start with that, and there's that universal message of what to
Yeah.
do to help be successful.
Yeah. It'd be great to have that broader understanding, both for what that means as kids and as adults, to make sure that
Right.
we've got the services and the supports out there to keep
Yeah.
pushing forward.
Yeah. I know a lot of people talk about the adult homes too, the Prader-Willi specific homes. It'd be nice to have, I guess, a larger pool of appropriate
Yeah.
residential options for our adults.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to say, I'm just so grateful that we got to know each other and I get to collaborate with you and laugh
Yeah.
with you on a regular basis.
Yes, for sure.
So thanks for being my friend.
Yeah. Thank you for being a friend.
I'm not singing. And now Noelle is singing across the room.
I'm sure her rendition is much better than mine.